Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to be going over the process of project 5. Um, this project, we're basically just breaking down anatomy. So we're applying what we've been learning in class with gestures and life drawing, with actually studying these poses that we're doing and really understanding how the bones and muscular structure play into these sorts of poses. So let's get started. So open up Photoshop, and what I want you guys to do is to make this sort of, hit this button right here so it's not taking up your whole screen, and then you can put your pose from Pose Maniacs over here. And then you're going to create 11.5 by 11 inches, or if you want to put them side by side, you can do a landscape. I'm going to go ahead and do the portrait version, which is the up and down vertical orientation, and make sure your resolution is 300 dpi. You don't want it to be 72 because then you're going to be working a lot with pixels and it's going to make it really hard to define what you're trying to draw. So I'm also going to change my background color over here. Let me drag over the color picker, just because I find white's a little hard to stare directly at. So I'm just going to tone that down with a little bit of a gray. And voila, there we go. Now, in your internet browser of your choice, go to posemaniacs.com. It's just www.posemaniacs.com, no caps, and it's going to take you to this website. And basically, this is a website full of reference poses, and each of these poses can be spun around, and it's the same pose taken from a bunch of different angles. And then you can click on your pose, like I have here, and you can spin them around. My internet's a little shoddy right now, so it's going to take a minute to render. And so you can really view this pose from any angle. So this is actually a really good resource when you're working on illustrations, on storyboards, even in animation for key poses. You can see over here there's all kinds of different angles. This is an HO angle, which is like a straight on angle. You have different types of poses. You have different types where there's a close-up of the face. This full means the full body. Model might be a moving model, so like a walk cycle and a pair where there's multiple models on the screen. You also have your choice of models over here, and you can choose child, female, male, or male freak. This is male freak, so this is not what we're choosing for this project. For this project, I want you to choose either the male or female models. It really doesn't matter which. The only main difference with the skeleton is that the female shoulders are going to be more narrow and her hips are going to be broader. And she'll be a little bit shorter than the male figure. That's only the main differences, but we don't want to mess with him because he's really cartoonish, and we're here to understand realistic anatomy before we go and break the rules and do something like him. Same thing with the child. Don't bother with the child because, again, we're trying to zero in on this emphasis of normal human proportions for normal adult characters, because most of the characters that we see, the main characters, they're always of adult age, or at least adult-ish age. You think of Disney, there's rarely a time where a kid is the protagonist for the entire movie. Lilo and Stitch is a good example of that not being true. Most of the time we might see them as kids and then we see them as adults. So what we're going to do with this project is you're going to choose a pose. Don't choose something from a really high angle like this, or low angle, where you're going to have a lot of foreshortening. Like this would be a no-no. Pick something that's a little bit more straight on, like this one, or this one, or this one. This one's a little tricky because his arms are out front. The further away the arms are from the body, the easier time you're going to have. So if you really want the challenge, you can go ahead and pick a more challenging pose, but just pick a pose, okay? And then we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to draw him from the front and then again from the back. So let's just focus on the front right now. I'm going to choose a light color in red to start with. I'm going to go back to my brush. I'm going to choose my brush of choice, which is always this colored pencil, the hard version. If you guys want these files, just let me know and I will give them to you so you can add them to your brushes. I'm going to make it a little bigger, test it out, make sure it works as I want. Excellent, it does. I'm also going to turn on opacity and flow just to give it a little bit more ease of control and make it a little bit more like actually sketching. And then I'm going to make sure my smoothing is at 0. This is really important. You don't want to have smoothing on while you're doing gestures and stuff, because the computer is going to overcompensate for each of these really loose gestural strokes, and you're going to lose a lot of your energy, because the whole idea with gestures is you're super messy, and that's totally okay. You're here to capture the energy, not anything else. And you can't capture the energy if your lines are really stiff, and smoothing's going to make them stiff. So we want that off. So I'm going to start. I'm going to find my line of action. If I come over here, it's kind of doing this. So there's my line of action. I'm going to add a head. I'm going to look at his torso, find the angle of his torso, find the angle of his hips. I'm then going to coordinate the top of the thigh with the back of the calf, put his foot down. Same thing over here. I'm going to really look at this angle between the feet too, see how far apart they are. Now I can come up here and see this is the top of the arm, this is underneath, this is the side of the arm. I'm not drawing the bone structure, I'm always drawing the contours. Now I can begin to kind of refine this, right? I can say its nose is there, just as a guide. I can really start mapping out these shoulders, how wide his broad his shoulders are. If I'm having trouble with this torso, I can turn it into cylinders. And to kind of understand what I'm seeing here. There's the center line, that'll really help. Throw in some kneecaps. Throw in some ankles. And of course he's not proportionate. And I will say, doing this on computer proposes its own challenge, just because the computer pens and brushes flow a lot differently from, traditional materials. So it definitely makes it trickier in a lot of regards in terms of just getting the form accurately down. But that's okay. That's why we have layers. That's why we have colors. We can really take time with this project, just a little bit, to really get these proportions down. One of the other things that's not so great about Postmaniacs in comparison to other life drawing assets that we have, such as the line of action site we've been using in class, is that these poses are really stiff because they're made by 3D models, not by actual muscles. Again, if you're having trouble with arms, it's always a good idea to just kind of map out with cylinder forms the actual size and length of them. And again, keep your eyes a lot on this pose over here, because it's going to make your results a lot more accurate than if you're just looking at your Photoshop screen. His face doesn't have to be super detailed for this project. You just want enough there to work with, right? Okay, cool. So here's kind of my base gesture. This would be like a 2-minute gesture, perhaps. So now I can lower the opacity, and I can come on top of this, right? So now what I'm going to do is you have the choice. You can either start with the skeleton or you can start with the musculature. Totally up to you. I think I'm going to start with the musculature just because I can see it on this Postmaniacs form. This is the plus side of Postmaniacs, is that we can really kind of see where these muscles lie. Because on a real human body, you can't really just, take off the muscles. So now I can just map them out a little bit. one of the things I should be doing too here is I'm just going to map out these markers of anatomy. We can see this little dip right here. This is where the bottom of that 10th rib is, so we can put a little mark there, wherever it may fall on your own drawing. Same thing over here. Same thing with the top of the hips. The hips are going to, that top of the iliac crest is going to be right here. And normally fat right here, there's no fat on this model, would poof out right here on top of that iliac crest. Okay, cool. You know, add in, make sure my kneecaps are in there, make sure my ankle bone. Same thing with elbows. Make sure that points are in there. His belly button. Wrist bone. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to double check my proportions. Remember, from the top of the head here down to the bottom of the pelvis, down to the floor, should be about half. My legs are a little bit short, so, but instead of having to redraw them again, what I can do, because I'm working digitally, is I can just select it, hit V, and I can just drag them down just ever so slightly. I just needed a little smidge. Hit the check mark. And then if you have something selected and you want it to deselect, all you have to do is hit Command or Control and D, and that's deselect. Likewise, if you want to select everything, it's Control or Command and A. Okay, so let's come back to this guy. B for brush. Excellent. Okay. Oops, wrong layer. There we go. So this right here, this line I'm drawing down, represents the center of his forehead down to the middle of his chin. This will go right through the middle of his nose, right through the middle of his mouth. Here kind of represents the brow line or the eye line. It's kind of up to you, depending on how you want to use this tool. This one's kind of more like an eye line for me. For this project, you don't have to worry about the muscles of the face so much. The nice thing about the face muscles, especially when we're animating, is that we all use them. So if we look in a mirror, which is a really handy drawing technique when you're animating a very specific expression, you can use the mirror and actually see how those muscles change the look of your face. Okay, so right now I'm just concerned about the contours of the outside of the muscle. But Postmaniac's kind of nice because you can see how these muscles actually overlap. Where they bulge, where they're slender. Really pay attention to these bulges because these are going to make a huge difference. And it will impact the end result of this project as well as, you know, feedback on it and your own repertoire of knowledge. So do your best and try and make this as accurate as possible. I'm going to outline his pecs here. We can draw this line back down the center line to how it's kind of curves and stretches. And now his abs are going to kind of follow along this. And abs actually do stretch all the way down through the groin. The six pack we see are only these ones, but we do have two more that go underneath all this other musculature and stuff, okay? Okay, so I'm going to move down to the legs right now. Again, focusing on this outside contour before I get too caught up in anything. Into the feet. And it's okay if you just use little triangles for the feet. Not going to hold that against you. We'll practice drawing feet and hands on their own in another class session. One of the things I do want you guys to do and try though is definitely try a little bit with the hands. The cool thing about the hand is that it's just kind of the shape, a thumb, which starts at the bottom here, and then a mitten. You just draw a mitten. You don't even have to draw the fingers, just draw a mitten. Okay? So if you were just drawing the mitten, it would just look like this, right? And that's totally acceptable for hands in this instance. Because then from the mitten, we can come in. If you guys want to try this, you can too, and we can look at how his fingers bend. You can just kind of bend them, and the fingertips are going to follow along this curve of the mitten. Here I'm doing some drawing through. Okay, so now with my guy kind of mapped out, he's not an exact replica, and that's okay because that's where kind of everyone's different style sort of comes in. But make no mistake that style and being proportional are not different. My guy's proportional, he might be a little bit more cartoony than this fella over here, but he's still in proportion, right? Hand is about the size of his face. Feet are about the size of the hand, give or take. He's still half and half, so he's doing just fine. So now this is where the fun kind of comes in, and we can start figuring out how all these different things connect. And our model's right here. We can see everything. So here's the deltoids, and remember they're kind of like the shoulder caps, like on armor. And the pecs come up into here, through them. This right here, that's coming down off of his arm, is the Latissimus Dorsi. And remember, this is one of the back muscles, but it curls around the front like a girdle. This part right here that's coming off of it is also the lats, and it interweaves with your muscles here as part of your abdominals. So it creates this kind of girdle shape. So when you see a muscular man turning from the side here and you see those little shapes, it's not ribs, it's just abs in the Latissimus dorsi, or dorsi, whatever you want to call it. Again, the muscle names are not our primary focus, it's everything else. So here I can see the generic shapes, and I'm going to work in muscle groups. Again, we don't have to draw every single muscle. We have some extensors and flexors in the arm. Cool, cool. Bicep coming down here. There's a tricep underneath. Again, we have flexors and extensors coming through here. Okay, so now we can come down to the leg, and remember we have quads, which wrap around the front here. And the quads are actually multiple muscles. But we kind of consider them all in a group because they all kind of have the same function. Okay, coming down here, remember our shin bone and our kneecaps don't have a lot of protection on them, so that's why it hurts really bad when you get hit. So we can draw little circles here for the calf muscles. There we go. Front of the guy is done. Muscles are done. How easy was that? So now what I can do is I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to lower this opacity on a new layer. I'm going to choose whatever color I want, but a darker color, please. Okay. And now I can turn off opacity and flow. And now if I wanted to, I could turn on a little bit of smoothing. Now I'm going to make him pretty. And again, this doesn't have to be super finessed. I'm going for kind of a scratchy look, which is totally fine too. You don't have to have absolutely perfect line work for this particular project. One thing to note right here is that his clavicle, because we have kind of this upward view, is cutting into his neck, and that's totally normal. That's what happens when we lift our arms above our shoulders. And right here, especially with the arm here, really take a look at what's overlapping what. That's really important, okay? Just to get a feel for how these muscles are attaching, how they function. Actually, I'm gonna not outline the deltoid quite so much before coming in with this. There we go. Give his biceps some breathing room, right? I'm actually going to turn smoothing down. Even 7% is quite a bit. And here I'm just adding little lines to show how the muscle stretches across this form. That's important too. So just take a minute while you're drawing this to just add a little bit of these in. If you need to, you can come over here and hit full screen and check and see how they're flowing over here on this dude. Or on whatever model you choose. No, that's not how his eyes go. Never mind. He reminded me of a character. There we go. He's perfect. Okay, so now I can come down. I can keep working here instead of getting distracted. And again, this might seem like a lot of visual information with all this stuff, but if you just kind of break it down, you work from this general to specific, and you work in chunks, it's actually not that bad. Look how quickly I'm moving along, right? Again, his feet are not our main concern. We do want to try and make a hand. Voila, okay, so now my muscle drawing portion's done. All I have to do now is go onto the drive, and what you're going to do is if you go into module 1, go into, I believe it's projects, there is a write-up for project 5, and if you open it up and scroll down past all the text and the instructions, there's actually reference photos. So now, what I'll be doing here in the next section is I'm actually going to color code these muscle groups, and I'm going to name them. Okay,